Hello and welcome to FinTech Talk. I'm your host, Charles Orton-Jones. Today we're looking at a subject that's pretty new to me, and I think it will be new to many people watching, which is the ability to transform fraud dispute. Now, traditionally, disputing fraud has been a manual, it's been a human intervention and time-consuming activity. But with the rise of big data and AI, there's a theory that it could be automated. This would save an absolute fortune for banks and financial organizations, but it's very much on the cusp of what is possible. So to find out whether it really is a plausible strategy, FinTech Talk, of course, has invited experts to thrash out the issue. And probably one of the greatest authorities in the world right now is Joe McLean. Joe is the co-founder and CEO of Quavo. Quavo makes the software that automates and runs AI-assisted and big data-assisted fraud dispute resolution. So there really is no one better to talk to. So Joe, if you turn your camera and mic on. Joe, am I right in thinking this is pretty cutting edge? I mean, it's not a subject I've heard a lot about. Where are we with this?
Yeah, so Charles, it's interesting. For me, it's kind of near and dear to my heart. I've been in this space for about 25 years, so pretty much my entire adult life. And it's one of those areas that, frankly, just didn't get the attention that it had deserved. And maybe it just wasn't as sexy as something like fraud prevention or fraud detection. But now what we're seeing is this trend to start using these cutting edge technologies like data and analytics and like AI and bringing that into the fold to solve a very significant problem, something that impacts banks on the compliance front, on the expense front, on the losses front, and really on the account holder front as well. So we are certainly trying to bring in those sorts of technologies to solve what's a very, very expensive, become a very, very expensive problem for banks and issuers and credit unions alike.
Well, it's massively expensive. So just talk us through it. How does it work? How can you resolve a fraud dispute using AI and big data?
Yeah, so there's a few different ways, and it really depends on the type of transaction that you're talking about. I think the most obvious scenario is maybe you have your credit card stolen, right? And somebody goes out and they use that, and banks will do a very good job at detecting that activity up front, maybe give you a call. Once you start talking to an analyst, that fraud and dispute transaction comes through the back door and now needs to be processed. And there's a few things that are going to happen in these scenarios. Either it is a true fraud situation and somebody historically has had to investigate that and you try to recover the money from the merchant, or the bank takes it as a loss, or there's other scenarios where it may be first person fraud, where the person that actually is calling and talking to the bank may have committed that act themselves, right? They may have actually used their card, and either they're being a little nefarious with their usage and their interactions with their bank, or they just misunderstood, right? Maybe the merchant description with the transaction wasn't correct. So for us, really what we like to do is we like to take all of the data points really up front, in the same way that the fraud detection space always has. Things like geovariance and transaction spending patterns and location of the cardholder. All of those sorts of activities can really help a software solution decide, what's the best course of action in moving forward with this fraud investigation. Is it first-person fraud or is it true fraud? Either way, historically, this has always been solved by having people do all of this work and look at 15, 20 different systems to try to put together this story. And now what we're doing is we're collecting all of that data, we're putting it into the solution, and having the solution make the recommendation on how to manage that investigation and whether we want to put that in front of a person or not.
Now, something I love hearing about is all the different data sources that can be used. This is certainly true in fraud prevention, even in stuff like credit scoring these days. They seem to suck in just an incredible array of data sources. I mean, how many data sources are you talking about? And just name a few and talk us through, some of the really significant sources of information that maybe is a giveaway when there's a fraud dispute.
Yeah, I mean, the answer is as many as we can get our hands on, right? I will take all the data that I can get to help the AI make the right decisions. But some of these might be your core banking engine, right? So we're gonna pull data from the transaction history or demographic data about that particular account. It might be data coming in from the networks like Visa and MasterCard and information that we can pull back in to help us understand transaction patterns, data from your online banking system or your native mobile banking system that we can pull in and help. And now what we're starting to get into is third-party data. So what can I learn about the persona of this person that's committing this act, right? Can I go out to places like like LexisNexis and pull data back in, or can I go out to third-party transaction data sets like Chargeback Gurus or Chargeback 911? I mean, there's all these different data sources that help us paint the entire picture of the person and of the transaction that really help us determine, what the right decision is to make.
Terrific. And how much of this is sort of human trained, or to what degree are you using like blind machine learning? Because one of the curiosities of machine learning can often be, it draws conclusions, not 100% sure how it has drawn those conclusions. So to what degree is your approach and other approaches just allowing the machines to draw their own conclusions and find patterns in these huge data pools? Or to what degree are they being kind of manually massaged and trained by human intervention?
So right now we're still in the infancy, right? We're still doing a lot of human training, which I think makes sense for the maturity of the data sets that we're looking at. I mean, everything has really come into light over the past maybe 2 or 3 years. So a lot of this really still is human trained data. And on top of that, most of our clients at Quavo really, they're still a little adverse to machine learning, and as am I, right? We don't want the machine to just start making the wrong decision. So we are starting to get into some of that ML piece now, but we're very, very cautious. So we allow the machine to make recommendations, but not without significant scrutiny from a human before we make those changes to our models. We're just not at a point yet where we trust all of the information coming in to really allow the AI to sort of take over. So we're quite a ways away from Skynet at this point on the front.
Skynet from Terminator, I think Skynet. I think this is right because the power of AI is significant, but we've learned from other industries. I know the United States, I think something half of US states, judges are using AI sentencing recommendations, but the judges, of course, don't really know what's in the algorithm, so are taking advice without really understanding where all that comes from. I know financial services, which is, of course, an extremely cautious industry, could be a little bit nervous about implementing something that was making strong recommendations, again, without human intervention and maybe with an artificial sense of certainty. So it's lovely to hear you being super cautious. I think people will find that really reassuring. Perhaps you could take us just through the kind of spectrum of use cases here. What is it currently best at? And, what particular tasks does it struggle at? Because, fraud dispute comes in a number of different flavors.
So really how we look at it and how myself and my team talk about this space is we use a term called recapture. And what we mean by recapture is if a fraud transaction or a disputed transaction comes through the door at a financial institution is going to lose that money. So how can we best ensure that they don't, right? How can we ensure that things that involve the cardholder are the responsibility of the cardholder, and the things where potentially the merchant didn't do their due diligence we're holding the merchant liable, right? So that's how I kind of look at this. When something comes in the door, there's 2 opportunities for me to recapture that money on behalf of one of my clients. It's either push it out to the cardholder or push it back to the merchant. And again, we have to use a lot of different rules to make that happen. All the risk rules to understand the cardholder side, all the network rules to understand chargebacks and how we interact with merchants. So there's a lot of different parts that come into this space to make those decisions. And in fact, I mean, we've gotten really, really good at doing the recapture. So that is my favorite use case. We have gone from just this year, if I look at our numbers from January, we've been training our models and making adjustments. Through June, we did sort of a mid-year checkup, and we have increased our recapture rate across our entire portfolio of clients by about 6%, which is significant. I mean, that's a lot of money that these banks were losing before that they are no longer losing. So for us, I think that's the place where we are just winning with AI, we're winning with data, and it's really making a difference in putting the onus on the party that deserves to be liable for this transaction. I would say where we're not yet as mature, I don't want to say we're losing, but we're just not quite where we need to be. There's a lot of strange documentation and things like that that come in on the backside of the fraud dispute transactions. Maybe they're coming from the cardholder themselves, or maybe they're coming back from the merchant, and the ability to pull valuable data out of these documents. I mean, there's not templates. I mean, people will write something on a napkin and send it in as an image, and you kind of have to figure out what to do with it. So that's the part where we're trying to figure out how to take the data out of those images, right, and make it useful and feed those into the machine as well. And I think there's certainly room for improvement for us into that part of the process.
That's a great start. I mean, just tell us about, in theory though, because there's no reason I can think of that this, well, with the right data and the right tuning, couldn't completely automate the process, because I can't think what a human can do that a machine can't do. So, how optimistic are you that it won't be long until this is, mainstream? This is the standard way of handling fraud disputes.
So when I first founded my company 7 years ago, we kind of always joked that the goal is 100% automation. And we tried to stay away from Terminator themes like eliminate humans, right? Because that's not really what the goal is. Yeah. The idea is to really take people and repurpose them at these organizations into jobs that are really more revenue generating. I mean, fraud disputes is a compulsory piece of work. It's not going to bring revenue into your institution. So why put bodies there? I mean, our goal is still 100%. And if you look at our automation rates across our clients, that most of them are into the 90% in terms of how much work is automated by it versus how much work is manual. I would give me 3 more years, and I think we can get up to that 100% rate or close to. There may always be a cardholder that wants to talk to a person, right? And you're not going to get around that piece of it. But in terms of the tasks and the actual jobs in the background, there's really no reason that we can't get to that 100% in the next couple of years with more AI types of tech.
Now, I'm delighted to welcome a second guest. We wanted just to have a different perspective, maybe one from the payment industry. So I'm very pleased to welcome Marie Rousseau, who is a payments expert with the Consulting Resource Group. Consulting Resource Group is a collection of payment veterans who advise banks and financial organizations and everything payments related, from disputes, fraud, automation. So Marie knows what she's talking about. So maybe we can just add a bit of a second opinion here. Marie, so good to have you with us. Just tell me about the appetite for this. We've just been talking about how this really is something in its infancy. Fraud disputes traditionally has been manual, and Joe is very candid and saying we've got big plans, but we're currently still training the models, still fine-tuning the systems. Perhaps Marie, could you just tell us what the appetite is from banks and across the payment spectrum for this? I mean, this potentially is very, very exciting, isn't it? Even though it's in its infancy.
Yeah, I would agree. It is. It's very exciting, and there is a huge potential. I also think there is a huge appetite for this. I think, as Joe noted and you indicated, for many years, a lot of the work that's being done, especially in the disputes area, has been manual. And there's clearly many, many ways that AI and automation can help with this process, with speed, with levels of accuracy. Obviously, there's going to be a need at some point for a human to look at something every once in a while. But for the most part, this is a tremendous improvement, especially with generative AI out there now. So it's very exciting, and it can really, really change the face of disputes, particularly in fraud.
Yeah, it comes down not just to cost, but you mentioned generative AI. I mean, with the variety of assaults that are coming now, isn't it true that maybe this is the only way of handling what could be an explosion in volume of fraud? You know, the arms race that organizations that don't try and automate some of their fraud disputes, they're going to be lost, aren't they? I mean, this is the future.
Yeah, I think, you know, if you have that vision in your head of the old-fashioned sort of, someplace that has sort of a manual, like, kind of machine, and everybody sitting there as it rolls through and putting the parts together one by one, and you know, it's this kind of just very old-fashioned way of putting things together. That's not going to be sustainable, especially if you noticed recently there have been several articles about the expected increase in disputes that's coming, and it has been on the rise. And so if you continue to address it in that very old-fashioned manual way, you're just going to be adding bodies and bodies, and it's not going to be efficient, and you're ultimately going to lag behind. So really using a level of automation is the only way to get ahead of it.
If anyone watching this has a question to put to Joe and Marie, please type it in the box. And don't make them polite. Make the questions as difficult as you like, because these are two experts. So it's lovely to, or bowl them a googly, as we say in the cricket industry. But throw them a curveball, I think, if you're American. Joe, I want to know how this can be done well. People watching this will be thinking, I work for a card company, for a bank, for a company that's really affected by fraud disputes. And maybe we'd like to do this, but we don't know how to do it. Is it immensely difficult? I mean, what do companies need to do this well? And what advice for them do you have?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the biggest thing that you have to do is be open to something new. I said it earlier. Marie just reiterated, right? This has been a process that just hasn't changed for a long, long time, and now it has to. Banks simply don't have a choice, and you have to be open to new technologies and new ways of working. Last year we saw a lot of our clients got hit with BIN attacks. I mean, there was double the volume of disputes coming through the door, and they simply couldn't handle it. We actually got a lot of new business because of that. People were reaching out saying, hey, when this happens, we're simply not prepared for the amount of work that's coming in. I can't double my staff in 2 weeks. It's impossible. But what you can do is you can crank twice as much work through the automation without having to hire anybody. So that, it all works out. But I think just having an open mindset to a new way of working fraud and disputes, especially with the rise of first-person fraud. Before, the old way is, hey, a dispute comes in the door, you do the chargeback through the network, and you try to win your money back, and maybe you get some information, you can hold the cardholder liable. And now what we're really trying to do is shift that investigation to really prior to that chargeback, but almost on day one. That dispute comes in the door, you have all of this data. You can make those decisions very, very quickly, or the system can make the decision for you, and then you don't have to go through the rest of that process. And it works whether it's a first-person fraud or true fraud. If the software solution decides that it's true fraud, don't have anybody look at it, right? There's no reason to have people look at those types of cases, which really is historically is not what has been done. They have had people reviewing all of these things throughout this process, 2 or 3 touches for end to end. So you have to be open to new technologies, and you have to be open to really transforming the way that your business works. It's not easy, but it's not hard. I've been in banking for a long time. I do think fraud disputes is one of the most complicated use cases out there. But I also think now, companies like Quavo have been working on this for so long that the solutions exist to bring into your organization. And not only that, now you have the software, but there are also companies like CRG that will help you with your transformation too. So you kind of tie those things together. You get your software, you transform your business. It's going to take you some time, but it's certainly an effort that's worthwhile.
I mean, I think we're now used to organizations, from banks to insurers to everyone else, running wonderful core banking engines that are cloud native, API based, and adding on a third-party service delivered over the cloud as a service. I mean, a lot of third-party providers say we can be up and running in, a day, half a day, hours. Is that the kind of client you're looking for, someone with that infrastructure? So you can just plug in, suck in the data, and get going?
Yeah, I mean, that's the ideal client, right? Somebody that has all the APIs available from their core banking engine or from their processor, because what the software will need is transaction data and cardholder data, the ability to process accounting adjustments and things like that. But it doesn't have to be that way. We're pretty flexible in terms of the integration that's required versus how much we can get done for you quickly. And we kind of don't look at it as, we don't stop on day one, right? We'll continue to work with you and bring in different parts of solutions to help you continue to build out automation well past your initial go live. So yeah, I mean, I would happily work with somebody that's a day one and let's get going and you have what you need. And then, to somebody that's, maybe this is going to take us 3 months to get all this integration done and work our way up to 90% automation. But we're flexible enough to work either way.
Marie, you see a lot of organized. Oh yeah, go ahead. Yep.
Yeah, I was just going to add to what Joe was saying is that, I think institutions are at different levels of automation right now. And, change is hard, especially, people have been doing certain things the same way for a very long period of time. But the effort is going to be worth, I think, the output that they'll get. You just have to kind of get through that period of time where you're changing. But like Joe said, if you're using a system like, an excellent one like Quavo has, and, you're using people who understand the processes and how it works. And that is what we specialize in CRG. We have people who are disputes experts, fraud experts, right from the payment brands. If you invest that money and time, you're going to see a tremendous change in the way that you're able to handle it, the volume and the speed. And ultimately, you're probably going to wind up seeing that disputes are no longer going to be a hassle, but a place where you are actually able to save money or create revenue for yourself. I think people often look at disputes as just a sort of fly that's swatting around their head and it's annoying, but it's actually something that you can benefit from if it's done efficiently and right.
Great. Now we have a question from the viewers. Stephen Lewis asked a question that was on my mind too, which is, how do we ensure the fairness and explainability of AI-based fraud detection systems? Avoiding bias against certain demographics. How do we explain to people when a decision is maybe gone against them? We can't just say an AI made the decision. I mean, people need to be told what the giveaway was. Joe, how do you communicate decisions to people in a way that reassures them, doesn't freak them out?
And that's a great question. So we are certainly operating within the confines of governing bodies, right? I mean, this is all very regulated. So within the rules that we have that assesses risk, we certainly have to be cognizant that we're not overstepping our bounds at any part of that process. So we very much operate within those guidelines. We can't simply say, we don't like you, so you're cardholder, you're now responsible for this, for this transaction, even though you disputed it. You actually have to have pretty concrete evidence that this was that person that committed that act. So, an example might be somebody goes out and let's say this is a bit of a nefarious character. So they go out, they use their card to buy a television. They call their bank and they say, hey, they buy a television, then maybe they go and they have dinner after, right? So they call their bank and they say, hey, I didn't buy that television. Great. Do you have your card in your possession? And they're like, yeah, okay. Well, now I can go and I can look at what the transaction details. I can see that was a chip read card, right? So I understand, that those can't be counterfeited. So in that scenario, it's very obvious that was the person that committed that act. Unless somebody took their card out of their wallet, went and bought a television, and snuck it back in their wallet to go then and use it for dinner, which is not a likely scenario. So there are very black and white scenarios like that. But usually we almost always, we rely on multiple points of confirmation throughout that risk assessment to determine whether that AI is making the right decision or not. So we've actually built a whole scoring model around this. So it can't just be one thing. It usually can't even be just two things. It's got to be sort of three different things at least coming together that coalesce to tell a story that this person actually did commit that transaction. And that's really how we rule out that bias, because it can't just be a single factor assessment. It's a 40 plus factor assessment with a scoring model wrapped around it to help us determine and detect the likelihood that something is a cardholder liable scenario.
Interesting. Marie, what do you think? I mean, do you think that customers are going to be comfortable with knowing that an AI has made a decision in favor or against them?
You know, I think it's the same for any kind of relatively newish technology, even though AI has been out a bit. You know, people have to get adjusted to it, and you know, there's going to be things that have to be corrected over time. You know, nothing works perfectly from the get-go. But you know, as Joe pointed out, I think that there's a lot of mechanisms to do that. You have multiple checkpoints on these things. You know, there'll be algorithms out there that will sort of indicate the different types of things that you want to look at for fraud. And then, you know, as it goes, it's going to get smarter and better. So is everything going to be absolutely perfect always at the beginning? No, that's what should be expected. It needs to learn a bit. But I do think that we are not at the beginning stages right now. We have already been using AI in payments for quite some time. And, you know, there's systems out there like the one that Quavo has that are excellent in looking for these different factors to detect fraud, and they will just continue to get smarter and better as the use increases. So yeah, I think that everybody just needs to get, you know, you have to get on board with it. You have to use it. You have to, you know, you can question it all you want. But I think that, you know, we are at a place now where we're ready for this, and it's very much needed.
Okay. And I just want to touch briefly on regulation. Joe, you said this is well regulated. I mean, the UK, where I'm from, the government historically has made a big deal of stressing divergence from the European Union on AI regulation, saying we're a lighter touch. I have no idea how this is regulated in the US. Can you just give us a touch on whether or not regulation is significant in the adoption of AI in fraud disputes?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is, right? Because, you know, every bank has regulators that come in and assess and audit. So we have to make sure that we have the ability to pass audits. So when we are going through our AI models, everything has to be documented. Every piece of data, every reason behind the AI why the AI made that decision, the correspondence that has gone out to the cardholder and what it said. Do you allow that cardholder to reopen that dispute should they disagree, right? All of those things have to be in place, or we fail the audit, right? I think what may be surprising is what we found, and even surprised us a little bit when the auditors we've gone through a number of audits with our clients at this point and passed all of them, is they really like the consistency in the decisions. What we're doing is we're taking decisions that people were already making, and we're putting them into AI to make them better and more consistent. And that's the feedback that we've gotten, is this is better than people. People make mistakes. The AI is consistent, right? We obviously, like I said at the top of the show, we've got to watch the outcomes, right? We're not gonna do machine learning and just allow the machine to throw new rules into the model. We don't do anything like that at this point. And I think that has helped us so far, but the consistency of the decisions has really been a winning factor when we're talking to governing bodies.
Fabuloso. And okay, we've just about hit our 30-minute mark, so we're going to wind up. But Marie, just to ask you for your forecast. I mean, this is an industry in its infancy, but you know, Joe hinted, what does he say? 3 years. He expects really the majority of decisions to be sort of AI assisted or AI made. Does that sound overly optimistic to you? What's your prediction of the adoption rate?
No, not at all. That doesn't sound overly optimistic to me. I think, like I said, it's already prevalent in payments, and many banks are already utilizing AI to various extents in various solutions that they're offering. The payment industry has been doing this now for quite some time, and so I think it's just rolling out the adoption, and I think we're going to see just an increase in the adoption. So 3 years doesn't seem that far-fetched to me. There'll always be sort of people who are coming up at the end. But yeah, I think that it's just something that is transforming, and we're right in the middle of it, and it's here to stay. So I think everyone probably just is needing to get on board with it if they haven't already.
And Joe, just final question for you, therefore. I mean, you talk about how the model is still being, fine-tuned, refined. How close are you to having the model just the way you want it?
We'll never be done. I think that's the reality of it, right? The fraud market changes, trends change all the time. So yeah, I don't ever see a point where fraudsters. Like, I think you had mentioned it earlier in the show. It's a game. It's a back and forth game between banks and merchants and fraudsters, and fraudsters are always trying to stay one step ahead. And as long as they're trying to do that, then we have to make sure that we're always we're always looking at new opportunities to overcome the things that they're trying to get away with in the market. Fantastic.
Well, Joe and Marie, thank you so much for joining me. I can't think of an issue where we've all been in so much in agreement, but I cannot see the alternative argument. I mean, is anyone out there really thinking, no, we're going to rely on humans to try and decipher the morass of fraud cases coming in? It just seems impossible and absurd. So yeah, I know we are FinTech Talk and heavily emphasize the tech side of things, but this definitely seems like the way to go. And this is one area of the payments industry that has been just slowest to automate. It's the final piece in the jigsaw, maybe, even if it's not one of the easiest to solve. So for me, it's been highly educational and reassuring. Joe, you say you're not recreating Skynet. That's wonderful to hear. No, but seriously, the number of data sources, the sense of responsibility, the desire to report the findings. As you say, there's never one indicator. It's a whole load of different scores to provide a verdict. So just hugely reassuring. So for me, it's been educational. I hope it has been for the viewers as well. FinTech Talk will be back in September, and I hope to see you then. But for now, from me, from Joe, from Marie, it's goodbye.